Let's take a little time to reveal the prehistoric stories that the earth once concealed. Mix them all together on this ancient land. It's time to spread some Palaeo Jam. Hello, welcome to Palaeo Jam. I'm your host, Michael Mills, and in today's episode, I am hoping that we get to speak about my favourite Australian dinosaur. What is that dinosaur? We'll come to that in a minute. My guest today is Jake Kotevski, PhD candidate at Monash University. Interestingly, his Twitter handle is Dino Man Jake, and the description says, "The undisputed dinosaur man. I study theropods and theropod accessories." Before we go into any great detail about talking about sciencey things, could you explain yourself?
Explain myself. All my friends know me as the dinosaur man. I'm the guy who I didn't grow up. I chose dinosaurs as my personality trait at age 4, and that's kind of just stuck around. The accessories bit, I don't know if you've ever watched the show King of the Hill, but the main character, Hank Hill, sells propane and propane accessories. So I study theropods and theropod accessories.
Well, it's quite simple then, isn't it? But it's interesting, that whole dinosaur man thing. So when I've got my Prof. Flint hat on and I'll go to a school or I'll do something. Sometimes I'll rock up at a school and they're like, "Oh, you're the dinosaur man."
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you know, there's more to it than that.
Oh, no, 100%. Now, look, several bits of influence. I mean, introducing myself as the dinosaur man. I'm in the School of Biology. I'm the only one working on dinosaurs. I'm one of a very small handful of paleontologists. Most people are geneticists, genomicists. So they know me as the dino guy, Dino Man. Jurassic Park 3, when Alan introduces himself or gets introduced as the dinosaur man, there's little bits of influence that I'm like, I'm going to steal that.
Yeah, and I guess so. You went from the dinosaur kid to the dinosaur man.
Yeah, definitely. I took a bit of a round trip. So I initially did an undergrad in genetics at La Trobe Uni. Heart wasn't in it. I mean, I finished the bachelor and that was kind of it. I almost fell into the hospitality trap, and then I went back, found paleontology, and now here we are 4 or 5 years later doing a PhD.
Yeah. So as you were doing the genetics thing, was the dinosaur kid like tapping at your leg and saying, "Oi, there's something here"?
No, 100%. Like, I'm here, as most people my generation are, because of Jurassic Park. What are the two sciences in Jurassic Park? Paleontology, genetics. When I found that there wasn't much job availability and it was quite difficult to get into paleontology, I thought about, genetics, I'm broadly interested because, that's how they got the dinosaurs. Maybe I could make something out of that, but it wasn't for me. I mean, particularly things like DNA and such. And as a paleontologist, I'm a visual learner, and I observe things visually, especially fossils and how they're shaped and the difference between them. So things like trying to envision DNA strands and such just didn't work for me. And back of your mind, it's always dinosaurs, always keeping up to date with what's going on with dinosaurs. So.
Yeah. All right. So speaking of dinosaurs, and as I said at the outset, you're a PhD candidate, and you've recently published the first chapter of that PhD in Cretaceous research. Yep. And it's about a discovery or a piece of a skull fragment found on a Victorian beach around about 20 years ago. And it's been identified as a
megaraptor. So for those familiar, Megaraptorids are probably what we know as the dominant apex predators of Cretaceous Australia. They're also well known from South America. They're medium to large bodied later in the Cretaceous theropods, your meat-eating dinosaurs, known for really big hands, really big claws. Record is incredibly patchy. We've got several genera across both Australia and Argentina mainly, and they're all less than 15% complete. The best part is, though, that the stuff in Victoria, the Upper Strzelecki group, which is around about 120 million years ago, they're the oldest Megaraptorid fossils in the world. So they're kind of like, they're a great spot for understanding their early evolution. Now, this fossil that you just talked about that we published on, it's the oldest frontal in the world. So frontal is part of the brain case, overlies the brain. You can see actually where it articulates with other bones and where it's overlying the brain. There's only 4 now Megaraptorid ones in the world, and ours is the oldest by 30 million years. And
that puts it in a good place to be the origin story of this group, doesn't it?
That's what I mean. So, I mean, of course, there's a bit of, taphonomy and fossil record and what rock is actually available.
Yeah, and we only find what we find, but yeah.
Correct. But it looks like the oldest stuff at the moment is in Victoria, Australia. And that's, it's a grereat spot. There's been ideas that dinosaur groups have originated in Australia before, but we're getting really, really good evidence for at least the Megaraptorids. And it's been put forth by Matt Lamanna from Carnegie Museum in the US and Phil Bell from UNE here in Australia. They've both proposed in separate papers, there's probably an Australian origin of Megaraptorids. And now we're, continuing to find the geologically oldest ones. It's really, really exciting.
So you talked a little bit about their features, and I just want to kind of just explore that a little bit more. What's different? Because you often that body shape that is the Tyrannosaur, that is the Velociraptor, that is my favorite Australian dinosaur, Australovenator. In fact, my favorite dinosaur.
A very good choice.
A very good choice. Thank you very much. So there's a similarity of shape in the same way that there's a similarity of shape with long necks. It's they've got the long neck and the elephant-like legs and stuff. So what is it that distinguishes the Megaraptorids? It's the claws, because they're
the claws. It's the claws and the skull. So I mean, the skull fragments are really, really rare, like I said. But in our paper, we actually discuss a bit at least the snout morphology. So there's 2 nasal bones, the snout bones, in a juvenile Megaraptor, and the way that it looks like it articulates with the frontal, the way that our one is shaped as well, it seems like they evolve conditions in their upper skull that allow for a more elongate snout and relatively thin. These guys are also known for pretty, relatively small teeth for their size. So you think of the big ones like T-Rex, or look at other groups like the Carcharodontosaurs, something like Giganotosaurus, which was in Jurassic World, the latest one, or Abelisaurus, something like Carnotaurus. These are all groups of animals that got relatively big, really, really big for a theropod. I mean, some of the biggest ones known. And they've got this kind of large, robust head, skull, and those reduced forelimbs. T-Rex is famous for its little arm wavy, tiny hands. Megaraptorids, we now know as of last year, got quite big at the end of the Cretaceous. There's one from, forget the formation, but they called it Macrothorax, which pretty much means large-chested shadow of death. Which, I mean...
What a glorious name.
Oh, it's great. Mape was like some kind of ghost or demon or something from that region in their folklore. Yeah. And Macrothorax, of course, big chest. That's the big-chested demon. That thing they think is pushing 9-10 meters, but it's retaining those Megaraptorid traits of the long arms but a relatively small skull. So they're doing something opposite to the rest of the big theropods. From what we can tell, those arms are kind of their diagnostic trait. They're just big hands, big claws, and we just don't know enough about them to tell. It's likely a predatory adaptation, but exactly how or what or why is still a mystery.
Yeah, so I'm interested in that because with Australovenator, one of the obvious things, and I mean, I've been to Winton and I've been in that room where it is, and it's like these are big claws.
Yeah.
The longer snout, what the evolution of you're saying the snout was sort of showing tendency to elongate and get a bit longer. What might be the function of that? Has that been looked at?
That's the thing. That's really interesting. So we know that they have long snouts pretty much off juvenile Megaraptor. It's a paper from 2014. Whether or not that's representative of adult versions or the entire group, it's hard to say. But at least in the evolution of their frontals and from what we can see, the 30 million year transition from our one here in Vic all the way to the late Cretaceous Argentinian ones, they seem to evolve things that adapt for the nasal to elongate. We need more material to actually, continue supporting this, but it's hard to say what the adaptation would be. I mean, if they're anything like the dromaeosaurs like Deinonychus, Velociraptor or such, where they've got that killing mechanism on their limbs, it's likely not a hunting adaptation, but, it's hard to say. It's kind of like we're on the forefront of Megaraptorids. We've only known about them for 25 years.
Because as a group, they've kind of not been a group and been a group and wobbled around and been put in different places.
They're all over the shop. They were
like the nomads of the theropod
They
world.
are. They are. They're kind of they're an enigma in the group. And Megaraptor itself, I think, was 98. And then we found a few more since then. Australoveneta was 2009. And it's the most complete theropod in the country, which is our record's not as great as some other places, but it's still really cool. It's a great specimen. But they've jumped all over. They've been, placed as carcharodontosaurs. They've been placed as tyrannosaurs. They're placed outside tyrannosaurs sometimes. We have them inside tyrannosaurs as tyrannosauroids. It's kind of the big overarching group next to tyrannosaurids, which is the one that gets, the big famous ones like T-Rex and such. So, I mean, we've seen there's several instances of that elongate snout in tyrannosauroids. There are some tyrannosaurids, such as Alioramus, that get an elongate snout relative to the rest of the group. It's happened before in that group. We just don't know what the pressure is on Megaraptorids. It was hypothesized that in something like Alioramus, maybe it was targeting smaller prey. Whereas, in Megaraptorids, they've got the adaptation of the forelimb. That's, the hand is quite large. They've got the most musculature in their forearms. There was a paper earlier this year. Just how or what they're doing is still a mystery. I mean, it's obvious they're hunting, but just how they're using it is so
yeah, they're not eating cabbages, are they?
No. It's I heard someone coin it the hug of death.
So this 20-year-old, well, obviously it's a lot older than that, but this object with this partial skull, really interested to that thing of I've got a megalodon tooth, and I look at that, and it's clearly a shark tooth.
Yep.
Even if I hadn't seen a megalodon tooth before, I've seen great white shark teeth. It's similar. When you've got just a piece of a skull fragment, what are the techniques that you use? How do you? And I guess part of it is that with the megalodon example, it's like, well, I know what shark's teeth or some shark's teeth look like. So, I suppose, what skull fragments or skulls of Megaraptorids look like. What's the process of identification? Because it is when you talk about the 15% of them is the most that we've got of one.
Yeah. Yeah. It's for me, I do it as a process of elimination. First things first, figure out if it's a theropod. If you've got a theropod, great. Then you start looking through theropods and comparing. Like, okay, we're in Australia. We're former Gondwana. This is the late Cretaceous. What do we know is in Gondwana broadly? Megaraptors, carcharodontosaurs, abelisaurs. Then start looking through. Abelisaurs are characteristic, particularly on this element, the frontal. They've got this intense ornamentation. I don't see an ornamentation. Cut them out. Carcharodontosaurs are quite wide and heavy set in their frontal. This one's relatively thin and gracile. Cut them out. And you just keep kind of working through what you know and what you have until you get to a point where you're like, this is the likely thing. We're going to compare it to animals in this group. And so then you go look at those animals and you look for the features that are similar. One we've got an example of is there's kind of a suture line between the frontal, and we've got a little bit of the parietal, which is the bone that fuses behind it in the skull. And the way that the suture line runs is similarly seen in some of the Megaraptorids. And, they're overarching group like Tyrannosauroids. So we know that, okay, we're in the right place for seeing those similar characters of the skull. And you just work your way down until you find your most likely candidate. And that was the issue with this one, is that it's 30 million years older than any other Megaraptorid skull element in the world. It's the only upper skull fragment in the entire country. Australoveneta's got its dentaries, the lower jaw. So we've got nothing from the upper skull to compare to. So we're looking outside the country in the similar groups until we find more. That's what we do.
Yep. So I'm guessing, and I've been on paleo digs where there's a moment where people are looking at a thing that's been kind of dug out and they're like, oh, I'm not quite sure what this is, which is a glorious moment.
Yeah,
because it's that moment.
It's super exciting
of discovery and stuff. But after that, then there's those other moments of when you suddenly realize what it is. Like
Yep.
what for you going through the dinosaur kid that's become the dinosaur man, what are some of those moments for you where you've gone, oh my God, this is awesome? Or are there too many to pick from?
There's a lot. I mean, I think the first one for me was when I first inquired about doing my second bachelor degree. I reached out to Jeff Stillwell, who was based at Monash in Earth Sciences. And I asked, can I do another undergrad, which eventuates into honors? He's like, yeah, come visit my lab. I'll show you around. And he brought me to his office and he hands me a round rock. I'm like, cool, what's this? He's like, that's a dinosaur egg from China. I'm like, oh, shit. I didn't know people just hand you fossils. That was a huge thing for me because I mean, my experience then was Melbourne Museum, and most of the stuff on display are replicas of things internationally. We have our little Victorian specimens there, but when you're a young kid, you want to see the big skeleton. So just holding something was like, this is really, really cool. And then so for this one, probably the next one is actually this element. This was given to me by Eric Fitzgerald. He's the curator of paleontology at Melbourne Museum. And just after I'd started my PhD last year, probably 3 months in, he came to me with a photo. He's like, hey, we have this. It's a frontal with a fused parietal. We think it's theropod. Figure it out. And I remember
that's a project, isn't it?
It was great. So I'm supervised by Steve Poropat. He's now at Curtin University. Yep. And I remember saying to Steve, this is really, really cool. Steve's like, great. That's an awesome project. That's a great start. I'm like, yeah, it's really cool. It should be done relatively quick. It's one bone. How long can it take? And then,
Did he start laughing?
he just said, I'll hold you to that. And that was May or June of 2022. And of course, the paper published November 2023. So it just gives you, it's a good glimpse into how paleontology works. And, this was my kind of real first foray into anatomical descriptions. We also ran some phylogenies, and it was a lot of learning and a lot of practice, but still a really cool specimen. That is, to hold the oldest example of a Megaraptorid skull bone in the world, the only upper skull bone from a theropod in the entire country, to know that is put to my name, it's like, that's really awesome. That's really, really cool.
That's a pretty cool thing, isn't it? And to think back to the dinosaur kid, what he would have thought of holding something
100%.
It would have blown his mind. Although the dinosaur kids tend to be funny, because he would have probably taken it in his stride as well. He would have just gone, oh yes, of course.
Yes, of course. Yes, a dinosaur fossil. Well done. Very good.
Yeah.
I mean, I went from my grandparents used to watch me when I was a kid, and they have a vegetable garden, and between their planting seasons, my grandfather would hide chicken bones in the garden for me to dig up and find. Like, oh yeah, it's a bird.
Birds are dinosaurs, so hello. Yeah,
we stuck to theropods.
That's right. He's stuck within the group. So speaking of theropods, what was it about them as a group?
But why?
That made you go, that
it's
the bitey, clawy killing thing, isn't it?
Yeah, we go back to Jurassic Park. I mean, I watched that for the first time when I was 3. And just the T-Rex, when it bursts out, big roar, attacks the cars. I saw that. I'm like, that is incredible. And you think, at least for the really, really big ones, we have no modern analog. There is nothing like a Tyrannosaur running around nowadays. Things like Triceratops I find impressive still, but you can kind of think they're like an overgrown rhino or an elephant or something. The sauropods are really cool too, because, no modern analog. But just the theropods, this big predatory animal, top of the game, like putting what mammal predators are to shame, is just phenomenal. I absolutely loved them. I was just obsessed ever since. And so when I was given any opportunity to work with theropods, I leapt at it. I thought, this is really, really great. We have, and particularly in Victoria, we have such an extensive record that hasn't really been looked at. They're all isolated fragmentary bones, but there's a lot. So, I mean, we've got so much to tell in the story. Aussie paleo is relatively young compared to the rest of the world when it comes to dinosaurs, at least.
Yeah. I remember chatting with Scott Hocknell years ago about he was in Adelaide they used to do this thing, Paleontology Week at the South Australian Museum. And we were talking to a group of kids, and he was saying, look, when I was younger, if you wanted to be a paleontologist, you had to leave because there wasn't much here. There wasn't. Yeah. Whereas now it's like, actually, we get people coming here to study our stuff.
100%. And I think Winton's been really, really great for that. Just the stuff they're finding is phenomenal. And I mean, for me, Steve's main thing was there's so much in Victoria. Yeah, it's not the best preserved. You don't get articulated bits, but he published, I think it was 2020, the first Elafrosaur from the country. And it was almost the youngest, the latest persisting Elafrosaur. I think they got beat to the punch by one from Argentina or South America, somewhere in that region by a week. But, that was misidentified as a pterosaur initially, and we found it to be a group of theropods that weren't previously known from Australia. There's so much to figure out, and there's so much that should be here when you look at broader Gondwana. You think things like Spinosaurs or Abelisaurids, Carcharodontosaurs, Unalagine dromaeosaurs, they're persistent, particularly throughout South America. And we've shown that our dinosaurs are really closely related to those. So why aren't they in Australia yet? Is it just that they're sitting there unidentified? Because
my suspicion is very much that it's more a function of that we haven't found them yet, not that they weren't here.
Agreed.
And a simple idea like that, when Cooper Australotitan was announced, and they've got some others that are slightly bigger than that. Well, if you've got a thing that big, then there's probably going to be something that's going to have evolved to try and eat it. So
well known throughout the rest of Gondwana, you'd think they'd be here.
Yeah. So in terms of the fossil evidence shows us that they were getting bigger towards the end Cretaceous, I think you were saying.
Yeah.
How big, given that we only find the fossils that we find, the ones that are uncovered, would you have an Australovenator type thing with large arms, plausibly as big as a T-Rex?
I mean, possibly. I don't think they get that big. Again, they're all very scrappy, 15% or less. MAPE is estimated at 9 to 10 meters, and that's pretty much at the end of the Cretaceous. I mean, we're not pushing T-Rex yet, but that's still pretty big for a theropod.
Pretty big.
I mean, look, for our record in Australia, because we're mid-Cretaceous, I don't see a truly, truly macro-predatory Megaraptorid in the country. I mean, our evolution shows that they get bigger through time. Matt Lamanna put forward a really good graphic in 2020 in his paper that showed that, they're confined to about 5-ish meters in Australia. I think Lightning Claw from New South Wales pushes about 6. And then they get 7+ in South America. So, I wouldn't rule it out that maybe they got bigger earlier. We just need evidence, really. It's just fossil records.
Because I think speculative paleo is fascinating because it's that thing of like, well, if you've got these Australotitan things, then something plausibly is going to evolve to possibly be big enough. And whether it's a Megaraptorid or something else that we haven't found.
You'd think there would be a macro-predatory theropod on the continent, considering there's one from every other continent in the world. You'd think we have something. It may just be the environment is not preserving them, but pure speculation, I call it intuition. I have a hunch that there's one somewhere up in Winton or somewhere else. There's something big hiding somewhere.
Yeah, maybe the corner of South Australia. We've got here in South Australia, we've got kakuru, which is a little opalized thing.
Yeah.
But we were mostly under the water, so we get really cool plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs and ammonites and all the other things. And there's whole sheaths of the rock here that was smashed away by glaciers and stuff. We've got about 5 minutes to go. Cool. This is what time flies when you're having fun.
It does.
So one of the things about the site where this partial skull was found. I was reading that it's slowly eroding away a couple of millimeters every year.
Yep.
So while it's not quite as dramatic as Lyme Regis, where Mary Anning found a whole lot of stuff because the cliffs simply collapse.
Yeah,
this is much more gradual and typical of Australia. It's like, you've got these secrets. Can you tell us them? Can you?
That's it. They're slowly coming. More and more is coming, I think. We're still collecting. Dinosaur Dreaming still operates. They're still digging the Bass Coast.
Yeah, so people like Mike Cleland go out and look for things, and it was him that found
Mike found this specimen in 2007, and again, it's just something that sat there because there was nothing comparative. The two main things are compared to: Megaraptor, the juvenile, was 2014, Murus Raptor was 2016. You couldn't really compare it to anything as rigorously as we did, because the material wasn't there. And things keep being found. Mike and he's now trained up Melissa Lowry. They're prospecting still, and they're finding incredible things. Dinosaur Dreaming still going annually whenever they can. People are still digging the Victorian coast, and I feel like the secrets are starting to reveal.
Yeah. So, last bit. This paper we've talked about, and the Megaraptorid stuff is all to do with your PhD. It's the first chapter of the PhD. So, what's the general? What do you want to be able to come out at the end, other than being Dr. Jake?
Yes. Look, Steve and I came to Al Evans, who's now my other supervisor, with our plan, two-pronged approach. First one is revision of anything theropod from Victoria. I'm going to try and hit as much as I can and figure out, like I said, the scrappy bones, they're isolated. I'm not going to be naming species off that. But if I can identify groups of theropods that we haven't seen before, that would be phenomenal. If we know to be looking for something in Winton because we've seen early ones in Victoria, that'd be great. The second prong is Megaraptorid evolution. So they're a really weird group. Megaraptorids, that kind of restricted group only known from Gondwana, but their early forms, Megaraptorids, are only known from Asia, Thailand, and Japan. Now, that's at a time where we're already pretty far apart geographically. They're not going to be swimming from Japan to Australia in the mid-Cretaceous.
Bit far.
It's a bit far. And so either there's a ghost lineage going back somewhere into the Jurassic or earlier Cretaceous where they have been able to disperse globally, or what we consider Megaraptorids aren't actually related to Megaraptorids. And so I'm planning on seeing the two specimens from Thailand at least, plus anything in Australia, and trying to run a phylogenetic analysis and actually see, can we pinpoint where Megaraptorids and Megaraptorids actually sit in the theropod tree? They're still a mystery. I mean, at the moment, they're coming out as Tyrannosauroids, but they may not be.
And I suppose that's part of the buzz and the fun, isn't it?
That's fun. That's it.
To work in a species or work in a group that has kind of wobbled around the place.
And because they're so recently known. I mean, I'd love if I could ever work on a Tyrannosaur, but we've known about T-Rex since the early 1900s. It's a very, very well-studied animal, and so is its group. Megaraptorids are kind of like, it's a frontier in theropod research, and so it's super exciting to be in that.
Yeah, and T-Rex is cool. It's
it's awesome.
It's and it would smash Spinosaurus's face in. I'm on T-Rex, but what I love about the stuff that we've talked about, this is about Australia's fossil heritage.
Yeah,
and we got to talk a little bit about Australovenator.
Well, that's it. We still have so much of a story to tell. We're still in our, like I said, in our dinosaur infancy, and things are being found, like Australotitan recently. So watch the space of Australian dinosaur paleontology. We're up and coming, and we've got a lot to add to the story.
On that note, we are just the theme music's about to start. It's just about to end. Thank you so much, Jake. I will put links to the paper in the comment section for the podcast, links to places like Dinosaur Dreaming so people can get a better sense of all of that stuff. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It was really great to talk. I always love talking Megaraptorids. They're just so awesome.
It's time to spread some Palaeo Jam.